And the Joel Natale Show. We are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at the corner of 5th and State, having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. Live, local, and award-winning. And speaking of award-winning, we've got Steve Scully here.
Nice studios. This is very nice.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. That means a lot.
It's
from
like
you.
Erie's version of the Today Show.
Right, the window on the world, Studio 1A, right?
Absolutely. No,
Welcome.
very nice.
You're coming in hot. You have a busy weekend here in
I
Erie.
do, yeah. Gannon commencement tomorrow, and then we have a big event on Monday. 100 years of Erie Insurance. Tim DeCastro and Marty Eisert and Tom Hagen, a conversation that's takes place at the Jefferson Educational Society, open to the public, takes place at 11 o'clock, so should be fascinating. And what we've done, too, the Chronicles WQLN program is fabulous. So I'm going to weave in some of the narratives, including bringing in the voice of H.O. Hurt, who passed away, of course, many, many years ago, but is the founder of Erie Insurance.
Right.
He retired in 1976.
And so we've got recordings and things of him.
Absolutely.
That's right.
It's a Steve Scully production.
You always have the great productions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
We did that with George W. Bush, and he actually sent me a nice note afterwards, because what we did when he came to Erie is we brought in moments from his presidency, 9/11, the bank failure, the war in Iraq, and it really allowed him to kind of reflect. And afterwards he said he had never done that before, that he's talked about it, but they never had those moments that kind of brought him back to what that day was like on Ground Zero, and he really enjoyed it.
It's remarkable. Give us a little bit of perspective here on your story, because I mean, it started here, right?
Right here, Channel 35.
Channel
Yeah.
35, and so on. Share a little bit of that, Steve.
Well, I'm a Strong Vincent grad. I'm the 14th in a family of 16. My wife is the 5th of 10, so we both grew up in big Erie families. Mm-hmm. There must have been something in the winter, who knows? But anyhow, went to American University and got an internship at WSCE, came back here for a while, went to Northwestern University, got my master's, went to Rochester, New York, Washington, D.C., C-SPAN, and now Sirius XM. So I'm in your business.
Yeah.
Talk radio.
Exactly.
It's fun, though.
You're doing the briefing on POTUS channel there.
Monday through Friday.
Talk about some of the guests that you have there and so on. Yeah.
You know, our program, having taken phone calls for many years at C-SPAN, I said, can we do something other than calls? Because Michael Smerconish does it in the morning, and we've got Dan Abrams. So my goal is to really talk about what's happening inside the Beltway. So whether it's Caroline Leavitt, or it's going to be cabinet secretaries, or members of Congress, or former members, they all come in. We do some long-form interviews, but we also do, 4 or 5 interviews in an hour. And the key to my program is we weave in a lot of sound. So it's not just my opinion, but we're going to hear from Donald Trump and Trump critics. So there's a real balance to the program. So if you want something that's not opinionated one way or the other, but really covers it straight down the middle, it's the program to listen to.
Talk about what it takes to sort through all that sound, because I would imagine it's a little different of grabbing sound from like Biden, who, I mean, he was available, but Trump, man, he sees a microphone and he walks right up to it.
Joel, it is drinking water from a fire hose, and is as rare as it was to see Joe Biden. Do you know how often Joe Biden came into the Brady briefing room in the White House during his 4 years?
I have no idea.
Once. Only once.
In 4 years?
In 4 years. The briefing room, by the way, which back in 2007, I worked with George W. Bush to renovate, because that is the pool. You know, that's why they call it the press pool. And it's where Lyndon Johnson used to swim naked with staffers. I'm not kidding.
I don't want to have that picture in my mind.
He'd be stripped down naked, and then his press secretary, come on in, boys, and they'd be swimming and talking policy. So the pool is still there. But anyhow, I digress. With Donald Trump, he is truly among the most accessible, if not the most accessible president in modern history, which is a good thing. I'm never going to complain about access. The problem is that it's this shiny object, and then it's that shiny object. The Kristen Welker interview on Sunday, and I made this point Monday because he had talked about he doesn't know if he needs to defend the Constitution. That was the headline for like 24 hours. And then he puts on social media, Truth Social, that he's thinking about Alcatraz. And so they're all kind of gravitating towards that story. And so what's fascinating with Trump is you've got to make sure you don't keep your eye off the ball, keep it on the ball, because he's going to throw things to left field, because that's where the press will gravitate. But the bigger story is right in front of you. That is Donald Trump. He is the producer of a reality show 24/7, and he loves the cameras in the Oval Office. He loves the press avails. He loves driving the narrative. I'll give you one quick story. Back in 2019, I did an interview with him in the Roosevelt Room, and I said to him, Mr. President, what is going through your mind when you're putting something, at that time it was Twitter, now it's Truth Social? And he said, I would put it out there, and then I'd go to the Oval Office and I'd turn on CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, and I'd see how it would drive the story for the next 10 to 12 hours. He knows exactly what he's doing.
And the press doesn't seem to be able to just say, hey, I want to stay focused on, what would be the more important issue than Alcatraz,
Well, here's the issue. So when you would sit down with Joe Biden, you often didn't know what the answers were going to be.
Yeah,
when
right.
you sat down with Barack Obama, it would be a 9-minute answer. And when you sit down with Donald Trump, it's like 4 or 5 answers. What you have to do in a Donald Trump interview is you've got to make sure that you're holding his feet to the fire, that you're dealing with just the facts, and you do it with a level of respect. Well, Mr. President, let me go back to my initial question. And because unless you press him on that, if you ask him about A and B, he's going to go to C, D, E, F, and G.
Yeah. Do you get a sense that he gets a free pass? That whole concept of Teflon Don. I mean,
I think so. Look, he's been incredibly lucky. Thank God he survived that assassination attempt not far from here in Butler. But he has set a very different standard, and not always a good standard, because let's be honest, the media are often afraid of him now. We see what's happening with CBS and Skydance and Paramount. We saw that $15 million settlement with ABC News, which I thought was abhorrent. And so the press today is dealing with Donald Trump at a very different level. The bigger issue, Joel, is within his administration, there are no guardrails. And that's really what worries me and should worry the country the most. Because in his first term, you had people like Reince Priebus, the chief of staff, and you had, Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State. You had other people that say, Mr. President, you can't do that. Those people are all gone. He now is surrounding himself totally with people who are going to only reinforce what he wants to do. And so what I'm looking at the John Thunes, the Republicans in the Senate, because those are the ones that are going to be able to have to stand up. And we saw a little bit of that with Tom Tillis, for example, announcing that he's not going to support Ed Martin, and so that nomination was withdrawn. So you're going to see more of that as we get closer. We're, 500 plus days to the midterm elections.
Right.
And, Tom Tillis wants to be reelected. Susan Collins wants to be reelected. The Republicans want to keep the Senate. At this point, they probably will, but who knows? The Democrats are going to make sure that they have credible candidates in states like Mississippi and Iowa, along with strong candidates to hold Georgia with John Ossoff. And then you've got states like, Maine and North Carolina that they want to tip off. And maybe Texas is in play. Who knows if there's a divided Republican primary if Colin Allred runs. So there's a lot at stake right now. And as we get closer to the elections, you'll see more Republicans, I think, say, no, Mr. President, we can't do that.
So we're already fully engaged in the midterms, it sounds like.
Not fully engaged. We're fully engaged in the strategy of the midterm elections. Right now.
Well, it looks like Ossoff is definitely vulnerable.
He absolutely is.
Yeah.
But
which is the Georgian senator.
Yeah, but with Brian Kemp not running, and you have what happens, I think the Democrats are praying Marjorie Taylor Greene, please run and get the nomination. Because Republicans have a tendency of shooting themselves in the foot. But if the Republicans have a tough primary in Georgia, and if the Cornyn-Paxton race is very divisive in Texas, perhaps that gives, a path. But, it's like Charlie with the football, in states like Florida, in Texas, it kind of is very elusive. So right now, looking at it objectively, Democrats get a House, Republicans keep the Senate. The Democrats might pick up 1 or 2 seats. But here's the thing to keep in mind. We don't know what the environment is going to be like in 2026. Tell me what the economy is doing. Tell me if there's more crazy stuff coming from the White House. That will determine whether or not the Republicans are united, or there's some disgruntlement because we're all looking at our 401ks and we're all looking at the economy. We're all looking at, tariffs and the impact potentially they will have. It is the economy, Stu. He ran on 2 things, the economy and immigration. The verdict is out on the economy. Immigration, I'd give him an A.
Yeah. We went through 100 days here, and now we're in the second 100.
You mean 100 years? It's felt like 100 years, Joel.
Yeah, sure has. But and that whole thing from 100 Days comes from FDR, from Roosevelt. And Mike, there's just, like you say, there's panic in the streets in D.C. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But do you think that maybe these next 100, and as we get into the fall, and really the summer, people don't like to talk too much politics. So the next 100 could be a move back to the middle, and maybe less onslaught, if you will, of executive orders and all kinds of back and forth?
I don't know if there'll be less of that, Joel. I think it's going to be a different rhythm to all of it, because now what we're getting into, the easy stuff, and I say easy because executive orders are easy. He can sign whatever he wants, and whoever is the next Democratic president, will rescind them. But the big stuff, where are Republicans when it comes to this reconciliation package, this big, beautiful bill that they keep talking about? Because there's a real division with a very narrow majority in the House. You can only lose a handful of seats. You've got the Freedom Caucus that wants deeper cuts, and you've got more moderate Republicans, like Mike Kelly, who says, don't cut that too deep. There's 30 or 40% of the people in this district are on Medicaid.
Right.
So it's very, very difficult for the Republicans, and they know if they go too deep, they will definitely lose the House and could almost certainly lose the Senate. So how does the Speaker, Mike Johnson, navigate all of that? He has put a deadline of the end of this month, Memorial Day. My guess right now, speaking today, it's not going to happen.
No.
His real deadline is the end of the year. That's when the tax cuts expire. But now we're getting into the really tough work. Now they've got to put meat to the bones, and the rubber meets the road. So we'll see. The executive orders, as I said, that's those are things that he can sign and tout, like the Gulf of America, which is not the law of the land.
Right.
Despite what he says.
You do have these lanes, though. You have there's a lot of interest in how he navigates the tariff conversation, but then there's this, how much will be able to be passed by Congress, and what's Congress going to do with all of this stuff. And at some point there has to be some reconciliation, you would think, in of coming together, right?
There has to. Somebody had said to me, maybe they continue with CRs, continuing resolutions for the next 3 to 4 years because they can't agree on a budget, which just shows how narrowly divided the House is and how toxic the environment is. But here's the thing to keep in mind. Put all of the shiny objects off to the side. Let's talk about the impact it's having on the federal government. Let's talk about the FBI basically eliminating tens of thousands of jobs, the CIA getting rid of 1,000 jobs. Let's talk about HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and all of the funding cutbacks when it comes to cancer research and the public health issues and the fluoride. Those are the things that people need to focus on, because those are the things that affect the American people. All this other stuff, it's a lot of noise. It gets a lot of attention. It's great cable chatter. It's perfect for talk radio like you and for me. But I keep reminding our team in Washington, we can talk about that. It's part of the news. But let's talk about the really important stuff that really affects the American people.
We've got Steve Scully here, Erie native, and on daily on the POTUS channel on Sirius XM. Stay with us. Back in just a bit. Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Continuing on with Steve Scully here from Sirius XM, and of course, Erie's favorite son. I love saying that about you because I
have the answer, by the way, to the question that was posed.
Oh yeah, is it appropriate for family radio?
We'll keep it clean.
Okay.
You got to read the question.
So the question is: ask Steve Scully about Jumbo in reference to LBJ. Who or what was Jumbo?
Well, the folklore is that LBJ was asked some questions and he dropped his drawers. That's the clean version.
Okay.
I'm just going to leave it there.
Leave it there. Thank you.
We're a family radio show.
Exactly. All right. So we wanted to talk a bit about what is the climate in D.C. And so my point of reference is, as I talk to folks that are employed by the federal government, we've got even young people that, maybe, 5-6 years into their career got the fork in the road email. And in fact, are having to report, maybe not to Elon and Doge, but reporting to their direct support, 5 things that they did in the last month. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing about? Well, you're probably hearing the whole gamut.
Well, let me take a step back because none of this should surprise the country. This is exactly what Donald Trump ran on. And this is what the MAGA supporters want. And let me give them, in their defense, what they are saying is if we didn't move quickly, it would never get done. Because presidents like George W. Bush and, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, they all talked about cutting the government. It never really happened. So I think
Barack Obama was talking about it.
Yeah.
400.
Bill Clinton, the era of
employees.
big government is over in his speech. But the thing is, it was divided government. And he had Speaker Gingrich and the House Republicans. So there was an incentive for them to kind of work across the aisle. Mm-hmm. By the way, the last time they passed a budget on time, 1996. It's the last time we've had the regular order and the process in which the budget is passed. So my point is that none of this should surprise.
Right.
The problem I'm hearing is just the rapidity of it all and the callousness of it all. I have a lot of neighbors who work for the federal government, some who are now looking for work. This idea of probationary employees, it sounds kind of, like you're on probation. Well, no, you're just a relatively new employee. Mm-hmm. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And there's no question you could cut 5 to 10% of most government agencies and not miss a thing. So that is a good thing. The problem is that the way they've gone about doing it, you're going to do a couple of things. You're going to affect a whole generation of young people who will not want to work for the federal government. And as I said, coming in, my big worry when it comes to national security, when you're cutting the CIA by about 1,000, when you're cutting HHS, when it comes to, research and NIH and all the things that are so important, that's really what I think is troublesome. Department of Education, that's fine. If you want to get rid of it,
I'm just
fine.
really surprised that there wasn't a significant data-driven precise approach. Even Donald Trump said we got to stop with the sledgehammer and do the chainsaw and do it with a scalpel. I thought that's where we were going with this.
Well, I had a niece who worked for Twitter, and she had told me that when Elon Musk took over Twitter, she wasn't there at the time. Mm-hmm. She said, look, he came in and just sliced and sliced and sliced, and then they figured, oh my God, we need this person or we need this department, then they bring them back. But that is very typical of how some of these big tech companies, Silicon Valley companies, come in to try to revamp the company. It's okay for a company. It's very difficult for the government. Again, let me be very clear. You can cut spending. You need to cut spending. We've got a $37 trillion debt.
Exactly.
But here's
$2 trillion deficit.
Yeah, and we spend now more on interest on the debt than we do on the defense budget. But here is the reality. You take a pie, that's the federal budget. 76% of the budget right now is spending that is mandatory.
Yeah.
Pentagon, entitlement programs. So you're only talking about 23 to 25% of the budget that really gets to where the cuts are going to be made, which gets back to my point about Medicaid. If you want to bring down spending and you want to get the votes that you need by the Republicans, Medicaid is where most of the spending cuts, along with, they can't touch Social Security. Legally, they can't touch it. But
and really, we've been going since Barack Obama of an expansion of Medicaid, and also You can go to Social Security, the SSI, the disability. I mean, we expanded the definitions for qualifications for SSI.
Yeah.
And so there's just more people that are dependent upon the government. I don't know how you'd put that genie back in the bottle there.
10,000 people on average every day retiring. So the baby boomers. And so those people are getting Social Security. Many of them are getting Medicaid. They're all getting Medicare, or most of them. And so
Right.
that's, why did the robber go after the bank? Because that's where the money is. So you have to go where the money is. In entitlement programs, if you want to cut spending, that's where the money is.
And that conversation really isn't happening, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, it has to happen. Like I said earlier, I have some real doubts in terms of, Speaker Johnson has been very successful, but this is going to be the tough one. This is going to be the tough nut because the Democrats will not lift a finger. They're not going to go for the tax cuts, and they don't want to see any cuts to entitlement programs, the SNAP programs. And so I'm not sure how Johnson is going to thread that needle with a 3-4 seat majority in the House. And then, of course, it goes to the Senate, where in some cases they're going to try to get the 51 votes, not the 60 votes, because there are very few Democrats, if any, in the Senate that would go along with this big, beautiful bill as well.
Wow, it is remarkable. There's very little wiggle room. It appears to me, Steve, as far as you can't even have bold leadership. I mean, you could do a lot of things, but when push comes to shove, to actually pass legislation, there's no room.
When Donald Trump was first elected, do you have a minute to tell
I've
the story?
40 seconds. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'll tell the story after the break.
Oh, okay. All right. We're talking.
That's what we call a tease.
Yes. So, Steve, and you have plenty of stories, which is awesome. Steve Scully is with us here. We got to take the news break at the bottom of the hour. Again, appearing with the folks from Erie Insurance on Monday at 11 o'clock at the Jefferson Educational Society for that big celebration of 100 years of pretty much the...
Erie's so lucky to have Erie Insurance.
Erie is so lucky to have Erie Insurance. They're kind of keeping us going here. Coming back after the news. It's Talk Erie on the Joel and Natalie Show. We're live here from our Kingdom Financial Group studio, also live on Facebook and on YouTube. And Steve Scully is our guest here. He is the host of The Briefing on Sirius XM. Steve, you're on like noon, right?
Noon to 2, and then weekends, the best of, and of course a podcast and the Sirius XM app. So get us anytime, anywhere.
That's awesome. Are you still doing any like TV shots or any like? Do they ever invite you to the scrum, if you will?
Yeah, I do a lot. I'm actually a contributor for The Hill, which is part of Nexstar, and they have News Nation. We have a great partnership with them, and I'm working with former members of Congress. I was in Knoxville yesterday working with 2 former members, and so we're trying to figure out ways to bridge the political divide. So I'm busier than ever.
Are you doing still that bipartisan policy stuff too, or?
Little bit, but SiriusXM is taking up much of my time now.
I bet.
Especially with the election, especially with Trump. So the demands have just been too much. Hey, we need your prime time. Hey, we need you during the conventions. And so I left in January.
Okay, gotcha. Let's talk about. I want to get to the human factor of what's happening, and it's not only in D.C., it's not only in the Beltway, but that's where you're planted.
Sure.
But we have 800 federal employees here in Erie, Pennsylvania, and so tell us some of the stories, and what do you suggest for these individuals who are truly scared about their jobs?
They're not only here, they're all across the country, and they're friends and family that I have. The reality is you got to find another job. That's what we're dealing with, because it's not going to change in the next 3.5 years. They're not going to magically reappear unless your job is that important. But again, here's the challenge. Not only do you have that, but you also have those who are thinking about retiring saying, what the hell, I'm not going to stay here. Mm-hmm. And so morale is in the toilet. Like I said, there's a right way and a wrong way to cut spending and to cut companies and organizations and the federal government. They all do it. So we've all been through it. That's a good thing in terms of trying to figure out how to, cut waste, fraud, and abuse. But that's only going to get a small amount of what is the bigger problem, which is the $37 trillion national debt. Here's a story I was going to tell you earlier. When Donald Trump was first elected, I was in the Oval Office with Barack Obama. It's the pool spray, and Obama clearly was upset that Trump won, but he was very gracious. I was watching the president elect at the time. This is in November 2016, and he's looking around the Oval, and if you could put a bubble on his head, it's like, I can't believe I won.
Right.
At that point, I thought, he is not an ideologue. He's going to work across the aisle to get things done. And of course, nothing, that's the furthest thing from the truth. He's very much doubling down on MAGA. He is not working with Democrats, will not work with them until he has to, when the Democrats take back the House and or the Senate, if that happens in, 540 days.
I know we talked about this a bit earlier in the year, but is it, as the books are starting to be written about the 2024 election, is there some clarity that's coming to bear about the state of Joe Biden, the fact that Joe Biden actually stayed in office instead of abdicating the throne, if you will, to Kamala Harris, which could have been a game changer? Did Joe Biden basically screw Kamala three ways to Sunday here?
Perhaps. Look, Bob Dole once told me, he said that the only cure for the presidential bug is embalming fluid. And you got to remember that Joe Biden ran in 1988.
Yes.
He lost. He ran in 2008. He lost to Obama. He became vice president. He wanted to run in 2016. Obama talked him out of it. Hillary gets the nomination. She loses to Trump. Once you're in the White House, you've got the plane, the helicopter, the White House. It's very, very hard to walk away from that. There is no question. Joe Biden, who I think is a dedicated public servant, ran as a transitional president. Hint, hint, I'll serve one term. Yes. And so I think here's what should have happened. He should have announced probably in late summer, early fall of 2023, I'm going to serve the rest of my term. Let the Democrats sort through who the nominee is. Had it been Kamala Harris or somebody else, they would have been a better general election candidate because they've been through the grist. I think that the way it all played out, because of that horrible debate performance on June 27th, then Biden gets COVID, then he has, Nancy Pelosi saying, well, he needs to decide, and Jonathan Lemire says he's already decided, and she said, well, whatever he decides, we'll support. So clearly, as somebody said, sticking a velvet knife to Joe Biden.
No doubt.
And I think that, that's going to be part of his legacy. And it's interesting. He's now kind of reappearing. He was on ABC's The View. He did the BBC interview.
He sounded terrible.
He's
Steve.
old. He's 83 years old. And what I don't understand is why people around him, like his wife, hey, Joe, you're 82, 83. We lost our son. Let's enjoy the rest of our years together. You have a great legacy. Let's build off of that. But now, sadly, unfortunately, for all the good things he did, and he had some successes, this is also going to be part of his legacy. Just staying too long, as we've seen so often with elected officials, they don't know when to quit.
When do you think we'll start seeing, some of the rising stars come up on both sides, on both the Democrats and Republicans for 2028? We're already kind of feeling about Chris Van Hollen, about Cory Booker on the Democratic side. And of course, Trump was very clear about, he really likes JD, and
Marco.
And Marco. But, what he didn't say is, what about Junior?
Yeah. When will we see it? Let's see. We've been seeing it since November of 2024. It's already happening. J.B. Pritzker in New Hampshire, the governor of Illinois. You've got Kamala Harris. Does she run for governor? If she does, then she doesn't run for president. I don't think she should run for president, but we'll see what happens. I think she ran as good of a campaign as you could in 107 days, but it was just...
Sure blew a lot of cash, though. Wow.
A lot. And that's part of the problem. There's just too much money in politics across the board, whether it's for president, the House, or the Senate. So I think that you're going to have a pretty robust Democratic primary. And I think that there may be people that you and I are not even talking about that might, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world that might rise to the occasion. Because the one thing that Barack Obama and Donald Trump proved, you don't need a lot of experience to run and be elected president. And so you could have a lot of other people who might say, hey, this is my time. Maybe not normal politicians, and that's going to be a good thing. And you will have a contested Republican primary. The thing is, if Trump decides that he's going to go for it, which he can't because of the Constitution, but if he figures out a way to do it, then I think that the Trump-Obama campaign is going to be one hell of a race.
I talk about this, and I talked about it even back in 2008, that kind of American Idol approach is that it seems like the electorate, to the great degree, is made up of mostly low information voters. And Rush made that a qualification. But that we like attractive and people that are really good on television, that purport themselves well or get us riled up. I don't see anybody. I don't think like a Paul Ryan type of candidate can ever win again.
No.
The top mark deal.
Maybe Joel Natale.
No,
you're
gosh.
tanned, rested, relaxed. You come from a swing state. You're a great communicator.
Oh no way.
Let's start the drumbeat in the swingiest county in the swing state.
Hey, while I've got you, and I've got just about 4 minutes left with Steve Scully here, let's talk about the media. I want to take this a couple different ways.
Sure. Let's
talk about local media first, because we're in a real concern here that a lot of the oxygen for the legacy media has been taken up now by YouTube and TikTok, and people are getting their news from TikTok, and so the local journalists that are grinding it out, and newspapers and television stations, and there's still a few of us in radio. It's a tough grind. It's a tough way to get those nickels to come together. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, heck, there's not even like a local distribution of the Detroit Free Press. I mean, you've got some of these things have gone online. It's
well,
wild,
not only that, I still get the Washington Post, and it's a shell of what it used to be. I mean, it's the editorial page is just gone downhill significantly. I'm worried about it as too.
Yes.
I'm worried about towns like Erie and Harrisburg and, state capitals that don't have the checks and balances that you need from reporters. Look, when I started out, you mentioned Channel 35. We had 3 TV stations and we're all competing against each other. Now you have 2, and they're still competing against each other, but not the way it used to be. And we had radio reporters like Lou Baxter who covered news for radio. You don't have any of that anymore. So who is keeping track? Who are the Hyle Richmonds of the world keeping track of what's happening in the courthouse and following the money? And you just look up and down the East Coast and across the country where you're seeing just a lot of this, because you have corporations that, bottom line, it's all about money.
Yeah.
There are still some great legacy news organizations out there, but if you watch local news in cities like New York and LA, these are major markets, it's not news, it's infotainment, because it's a lot cheaper to do that. It's easier for ratings, and we're dumbing down the electorate, and that's really the tragedy. What I do, I go to the strong news organizations, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. But they're few and far between. Chicago Tribune, LA Times, Washington Post, they're all being decimated because you have big corporations or billionaires like Jeff Bezos who own the newspaper and more worried about alienating Trump instead of doing the job of reporting.
Well, and I think it's key when you think about the state capitals and things. Even like some of these big metros, like the Minneapolis Star Tribune or the Atlanta Journal. Like you say, what's left in those
but having said that, there are other news organizations, a new one called Notice, News of the United States. Robert Albritton, whose dad used to own WJLA and Riggs Bank and Politico, sold that. He's now creating a whole new generation of young journalists that will be able to, that are trained for the purpose of covering local news. So check out, it's notice.org, News of the United States. And
Love it.
That's what is exciting about there. And we just had the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I know a lot of people complain and criticize that, but it's all about the press. It's all about awarding scholarships. It's all about the next generation of reporters. And so that gives me a lot of hope that, as bad as it is today, and it's getting pretty bad, there are some glimmers of hope in the future.
Yeah, we have Pennsylvania Capital Star, again, a totally online paper, and Spotlight type coverage, and so maybe there is.
It's still
it's
out
just going to
there.
be different, right?
It is different, yes.
Again, talk about Erie. Let's give you a second here. This moment, you're going to be talking about Erie Insurance's 100th anniversary. You see the buildings and things around town. What are you hoping for your hometown?
It is exciting. My one hope is that often the people who criticize Erie the most are Erie residents.
100%.
And it is a fabulous community. And you travel across the country as I have, and you see the bay and you see the waterfront and four seasons, and yes, a lot of snow. But the people of Erie are wonderful. They really are. And you've got great institutions like Gannon. You have Erie Insurance, Tim Nicastro, who's just one of the leaders of this town that's doing so much. And there's some exciting things happening along the waterfront. The city is thriving. Yes, we have problems. The city has a lot of problems, but so does everyone else. But if you come together and work together, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee yesterday, and they have turned that town around because the people internally did it. That's what has to happen here. The Jefferson Educational Society, which is just doing incredible work, and they're sponsoring the event Monday at Erie Insurance and creating a whole new generation of what we call Leadership Erie, to have people who are Erieites work to build a better community. So don't be down on this town. It's a gorgeous day today. It's a fabulous town. The people are wonderful, and the potential is just unbelievable.
Well, let me be the first to congratulate you on your upcoming honorary doctorate at Gannon University. Is it tomorrow?
Tomorrow,
Okay.
Erie Insurance Arena, and the Joel Natale campaign for president. We're starting it here.
Yeah, just get that out of your brain right away. Thanks so much, Steve.
You bet,
Appreciate
Joel.
it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
It is the Joel Natale Show here. Moving on this Friday.
Thank you.